I'll ask the questions and I'll leave it with the questions. And I hope I'll get a response later. You must now, ladies and gentlemen, if you believe this, you must tell me of a right action performed or a right statement, moral statement made by a believer, such as Dr. Lennox, that I could not make myself or couldn't state myself, something that only he could do as a believer that was right and moral, and I could not do because I'm not a believer. It's nothingness. There's a lot of nothingness. So those who want to claim the credit for the something, what deity is going to claim the credit for the nothingness? And who went to all this trouble, this fantastic explosion of nothingness, these infinite spaces of depart into eternal fire, you're dust, you're nothing. If you don't have our faith, you're nothing less than nothing, you're worse, you're evil. At a certain point, to the contrary. It's recently been discovered by a very brilliant physicist, Krauss, that in fact the rate of expansion is increasing and quite rapidly. The universe is expanding very, very fast. Very soon, if we hadn't been around at this particular point in time, there wouldn't be enough evidence left around in the red light shift for us to know that the Big Bang had ever even taken place. We're only picking that up from signals from a long time ago, which will soon be unintelligible. I'm saying soon, using billions of years as an index of time, of course, light years, if you will. Not light years, they're distances, but you know what I mean. Distances and times that are rightly called astronomical. What does this mean? It means that, though there is now something, after all, I am here, I do firmly believe, and I'm very happy to see all of you here too, especially those of you who paid for your tickets. It means that very soon there will be nothing. A lot of nothingness is headed our way. It's going to be all over quite soon. You can see it coming. Read the Lawrence Krauss Urban Health Stuff. It's going to explode away. It's going to fall apart. And if, that is, a couple of things don't happen sooner than that, we can already see the Andromeda Galaxy in the night sky. You can actually see it some nights without really the aid of a telescope, headed directly on collision course for our own. We have an appointment, ladies and gentlemen, with the Andromeda Galaxy. It's going to crash right into ours. There's something now. Enjoy it while you can. Nothing is coming. Whose design is that, may I inquire? Or perhaps before that, it's very possible that before any of this happens, we won't have to worry about it because our sun will simply swell up into a red dwarf, our oceans will boil, life on this planet will become extinct, and then the sun will collapse into itself and go the way that millions and millions and millions of other stars have. We can see them imploding and exploding and shooting themselves to death all over the sky as it is. Nothingness, there's a lot of nothingness. So those who want to claim the credit for the something, what deity is going to claim the credit for the nothingness? And who went to all this trouble, this fantastic explosion of nothingness, these infinite spaces of nothingness, and with the destiny of destruction written in every galaxy, in order to create this one privileged planet with this one very shivering, uncertain, vulnerable primate species on it that's only been here for 100,000 suffering years and has only been offered redemption for 2,000. Look first upon this picture and on that. Look at the absolute extraordinary scale that's proposed on the one hand and the absolutely, or not even microcosmic on the other. And I don't believe you can possibly take any claim of religion seriously here. Whatever is the explanation for this, people who say, well, since we don't know, we may as well say it's God, are simply drumming their fingers. They're wasting their time and they're trying to waste yours. Now, on this question of who's boss and why I don't think the Eternal Father idea is a good one. I'm sure I'm not the only father here. I have 3 children. My job as a father is to get out of their way, is to do my best for them and then make room for them. What if I was to say to them, oh, don't worry, I'll always be here. Not as in, I'll always be here for you, as in, I'm never going away. You'll never see the back of me. You'll never get to say goodbye, Daddy. No, I'll always be here. In fact, I'll be here long after you've died. In fact, I'm rather looking forward to that, because then I can sit in judgment on you. This is not even a benevolent form of despotism, is it? When you allow yourself to think about it. It's somewhat worse than I was saying before about the way that religion makes people first be terribly abject and then terribly solipsistic and arrogant and conceited. If it were true that all these things are attributable to an eternal Father who is unknowable except by those who claim, as Dr. Lennox does, sources of information denied to me and many other people, what would it mean at the minimum? It would mean we were living under an unalterable, unchallengeable dictatorship, which might or might not be benign. We've no assurance it would be benign. In my view, benign dictatorships are the worst, but that's another story. It would mean we were subjected to everlasting, round-the-clock surveillance, waking and sleeping. We would never have a private moment. Everything we did and thought would be known and supervised and invigilated and either rewarded or punished. Even Big Brother in George Orwell's 1984 couldn't be absolutely sure what all his subjects were thinking. But there was the crime of thought crime. You could be charged with it. Under the divine dispensation, no problem. You're convicted of thought crime before you've even had the thought, because everything is knowable. And how would the God who convicted you know? Because he'd already created you full of dirt and sin and wickedness. That's part of the design. And the horror of it, the fascistic element of it, is this. You're created sick, and then you're ordered to be well. So you're created full of dirty thoughts and wickedness and wrong ambitions and impure and foul nature, and then you're told, you better cure yourself pretty fast, otherwise I won't be answerable for the consequences. This is the worst imaginable kind of unfreedom, and I have to say I distrust those who wish that it were true. In my opinion, the original emancipation, the first emancipation that humans must undergo is the freeing of themselves from this man-made and mind-forged manacle. It might be asked, why don't I want it to be true? Why don't I wish it to be true? Well, I'll tell you, because once you admit that this despot exists, you will find yourself in the real world, in the here and now, subjected to the rule of man-made power, purely man-made power, ruled by other primates and other mammals who claim the right to do anything they want with you because they have God on their side and because their rule is divine. This is not a theoretical danger. I'll illustrate it in a different way if you like, and take up Dr. Lennox's point about the origins of morality. If you think that we wouldn't know right from wrong, we'd have no concept of good and evil, or the right action or the wrong action, or the right thought or the wrong thought, if we didn't have the permission of a supernatural celestial dictator, if that's where our ideas of good and evil come from, then let me ask two questions of you. First, okay, I'll ask the questions and I'll leave it with the questions, and I hope I'll get a response later. You must now, ladies and gentlemen, if you believe this, you must tell me of a right action performed or a right statement, moral statement made by a believer, such as Dr. Lennox, that I could not make myself or couldn't state myself, something that only he could do as a believer that was right and moral, and I could not do because I'm not a believer. I've asked this question in a lot of places now and to a lot of people, including senior bishops and archbishops and others. I have not yet had an answer to it, and there must be a good answer if they are to make the claim that faith licenses morality.
When you look at what we know from science, Hitchens is absolutely right to question the idea that the universe was made for us. The observable universe is over 90 billion light-years across, and more than 99.9999999% of it is completely uninhabitable, either too hot, too cold, or too empty for life. Earth is a tiny, fragile speck, and humanity has only been around for about 0.004% of Earth's history. Physicists like Krauss and Sean Carroll point out that the universe is headed for heat death. The sun will expand and wipe out all life here long before the Andromeda Galaxy collides with the Milky Way. That's not a setup that looks intentional or compassionate. It looks like indifference on a cosmic scale. And when people claim that a divine creator designed this whole system for our benefit, it really doesn't line up with the facts. A system built to destroy itself isn't one you'd call designed, at least not designed for us. Let's hear Lennox's response.
He mentioned in his initial speech that the idea of the Creator had been completely refuted by the question, you must ask who created the Creator, and you get into an infinite regress. I discussed that with Richard Dawkins in my debate in Oxford. If you have to ask the question, who created the Creator, that means you believe in a created God. And created gods are a delusion. We've known that for centuries, and we don't need to be told it. If you say who created the Creator, it means also that you cannot conceive of anything that's eternal. And I don't know what Mr. Hitchens' views on the universe are, or in mass energy, but the incapacity to believe in eternal is essentially the issue. My final point on that would be this. I said to Richard Dawkins, I can ask you the same question, because you believe that the universe created you. So I would like to know who created your Creator, but he doesn't seem to have an answer to that. Now then you referred to the universe and its expansion and collapse from the beginning to the end. And you said, what's the point of the whole thing? I would agree with you if I believed that the universe was a permanent phenomenon. But one of the things I understand from the New Testament is that the universe never was meant to be a permanent phenomenon, but is a stepping stage. I cannot go into what the Bible has to say about the notion of new heavens and a new earth, but I would simply want to say that this is something that is very clear in the Bible itself, which claims that the universe will end up in a massive heat death. This is something not new with science. And the point is that God is going to have a new manifestation. And that is why his plans are much bigger than we see watching. Because the relationship with God is not something that's forced. It's a real relationship of love. We've been given freedom. I heard a real caricature of the biblical story in saying that God had created us sick. God made a perfect world, ladies and gentlemen. But he made us in his image with the capacity of real freedom and real choice. So that if we say no to God, God will honor that choice. I wonder what Mr. Hitchens would want God to do with people that say no to him. He seems to have difficulty with the idea that God will honor the choice of those that say no. Why is that? Because God hates them and is some cosmic tyrant? Of course not. It's because God actually loves them. Now, these things are sometimes hard to grasp because there are so many distortions of God around in the world. And that's why, again and again, I come back to look at the person of Christ who reveals God to me, to look at his love and his friendship and his care. And if I ask myself the question, would I like to be in the company of that person permanently? My answer is a resounding yes. I can think of nothing more liberating and nothing more utterly magnificent that expresses the greatness of God. Now, we heard a challenge from Mr. Hitchens that he throws out all over the place. Can we think of a right action that can be made only by a Christian and not by an atheist? It's actually a very subtly interesting question to me, because there are certain presuppositions behind it that I'd like to briefly deal with in closing. One is this. From where I sit, ladies and gentlemen, whether a person is an atheist or a Christian or anything else, they are made in the image of God, and therefore they are moral beings. Therefore they're capable of seeing good and doing good. And sometimes my atheist friends could put me to shame. So there is that basic moral compass, which makes Mr. Hitchens' question a little bit beside the point. But if I were going to answer his question directly, I'm not convinced that William Wilberforce would have liberated slavery as he did if his motivation had been atheism. Because I noticed that Wilberforce liberated slaves only to have slavery reintroduced by Nazi Germany and communism in the 20th century. There is no guarantee, ladies and gentlemen, that the abolition of God will mean the abolition of the captivity of man. But my final answer to his question is this: can I name a good action that no atheist could do? Yes, I can. I can name one that no person of whatever worldview could do, and that is to give his life for the sins of the world. It is that characterized Jesus Christ as the one who was God, and that is unparalleled in its majesty and in its confirmation that God is truly great.
Lennox tries to dodge Hitchens' challenge by redefining God as eternal, but that's not an answer, it's a label. Saying God is eternal doesn't explain how that works, it just pushes the mystery back a step. Philosophers and cosmologists have pointed out that invoking an uncreated being to explain existence doesn't solve the problem. It removes it from investigation. It's not an explanation, it's a conversation stopper. He also claims the universe was never meant to be permanent, yet bases that on religious texts, not evidence. But modern cosmology doesn't support a designed, purposeful universe. The heat death, the vast lifelessness of space, and the destructive forces built into stars and galaxies point to a system that unfolds by natural laws, not divine plans. And when Lennox talks about morality, he avoids Hitchens' real point: that morality exists outside of religion. Saying Christians can be moral isn't the argument. Hitchens is asking for a moral act only a believer could do. Lennox doesn't answer that. Instead, he appeals to Jesus' sacrifice, something based on belief, not a universally provable or replicable moral action. So the question remains: can religion claim moral authority if it can't offer anything unique or exclusive? Let's hear one more time how Hitchens responds to that, and what he has to say about Lennox's attempt to defend it.
There is, whether you are a materialist or a supernaturalist, no particular reason to say that human life has any enormous innate value. After all, religion disposes of people in heaps and mounds and says, go out, we depart into eternal fire, you're dust, you're nothing. If you don't have our faith, you're nothing less than nothing, you're worse, or evil, wicked, so forth. So it's not as if by assuming a God, you suddenly find that life is all worthwhile after all. If it was that simple, we wouldn't have to be having this discussion. I think this, essentially, I ask myself, why do I care? Why do I care not just about myself and my children, but why do I think I often care in general? Well, if I didn't, I wouldn't belong to a species that would have got this far. It may sound a platitudinous answer, but I think there's some force to it. If we didn't have human solidarity, if we didn't realize that we are brothers and sisters one with another, that we have responsibilities, duties to one another, that these are not merely reciprocal in evolutionary terms, in other words, you be nice to me, I'll look out for you, but that they can involve real ties, real bonds of affection, friendship, even love. If we didn't know that we were able to think like that, and we exempt the quite large minority of humans who are born without this, the sociopaths and psychopaths, who I suppose we have to concede are also made in God's image, if you accept that tautology, it leaves nothing really unexplained. That would tell us why we had warm feelings for one another, and also explain why we were here instead of having joined the species that went, all the other ones, that went out of business, under the same divine supervision, I might add, including humanoid species like the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals, who it's quite clear buried each other.
What Hitchens says about morality is backed by real research. Studies in evolutionary biology and neuroscience show that moral behavior, like empathy, cooperation, and fairness, existed long before organized religion. Frans de Waal documented this in primates. Chimpanzees comfort the distressed, reconcile after fights, and even share food. These traits evolved because they helped social species survive. Genetic studies have shown that oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, plays a key role in human empathy and trust. This isn't theology, it's chemistry. We care about each other because we're wired to. Without this, we wouldn't have built families, societies, or civilization. And he's right that religion often divides. History shows mass violence justified by faith. The Crusades, the Inquisition, ISIS, and even colonial genocide, all done in God's name. So belief doesn't guarantee morality. In fact, secular countries like Sweden, Norway, and Japan consistently rank among the highest in well-being, education, and ethical behavior, all without high levels of religious belief. So Hitchens' claim is clear. Morality isn't granted by a god. It's part of our nature, shaped by evolution and society. Let's think about that. Do we really need religion to be good? Or have we been moral all along? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this challenged your perspective, like the video and subscribe for more real conversations that push past easy answers.